When my dad hit post on that photo of my daughter, he thought he was delivering a comedic masterpiece to his friends. The caption he wrote read, "Some mistakes grow up and create more mistakes." My mom immediately commented with a laughing emoji, and within hours, the whole family joined in on the cruel joke. My husband stayed silent, staring at his phone with a cold, terrifying calm. My dad thought it was hilarious until the next morning. At exactly 8 a.m., a courier arrived at my parents' doorstep. When my dad signed for the paperwork, his smug smile completely evaporated. It wasn't an apology letter from us. It was a formal legal notice that would dismantle his finances, strip away his digital footprint, and turn his comfortable retirement upside down. He called me again and again, but the game was already over. Follow my story until the end to see how a single post cost him everything. My name is Lauren, and at 35 years old, I thought I had finally built a thick enough skin to survive my family's cruelty. I was wrong. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when I sat down at my kitchen table, scrolling through my social media feed with a cup of tea. Suddenly, a notification popped up that made my breath catch in my throat. My dad had uploaded a photo of my 7-year-old daughter, a candid, beautiful picture of her reading in our backyard. But it wasn't the photo that made my blood run cold. It was the caption he wrote underneath it. In bold public text for all his friends, colleagues, and neighbors to see, my dad wrote, "Some mistakes grow up and create more mistakes." My stomach dropped. For as long as I could remember, my dad had viewed my life choices, my career, and my independence as mistakes. But to target my innocent daughter was a new low. Within minutes, my mom commented with a laughing emoji. Then the aunts, uncles, and cousins chimed in, turning the post into a family-wide mockery. I looked across the table at my husband, handing him my phone. He didn't yell. He didn't pace. He just stared at the screen with a cold, terrifying calm that I had never seen before. The family thought they were having a harmless laugh at our expense, completely blind to the storm they had just invited into their lives. The silence in our kitchen didn't last long because my husband wasn't just processing shock. He was calculating a response. As a senior attorney specializing in intellectual property and digital privacy rights, he looked at that screen and saw something my family completely overlooked. "Len," he said, his voice dropping to a steady, sharp register. They, snorts, didn't just insult our daughter. They committed a massive legal blunder. You see, that exact photo of my daughter had been taken by me on our private property and was already registered under my personal photography business catalog. By downloading it and uploading it to his own public page to mock us, my dad had actively committed copyright infringement. We spent the rest of the night in our home office gathering evidence. We took screenshots of every single mocking comment, every share, and every laughing emoji from my relatives. By midnight, my husband was drafting formal cease and desist orders alongside statutory damage claims for the unauthorized commercial exploitation of a minor's likeness. They thought the internet was a playground where they could bully my child without consequence. But we were about to teach them a very expensive lesson in digital law. Before we move on to the morning the notices were served, I'm incredibly curious to see who is standing with us. Please comment the city you are watching from right now so I can see how far our story of digital justice has reached. Turn on notifications too, because how my husband structured this trap will completely stun you. At exactly 8 a.m. the next morning, the trap was officially sprung. My parents were sitting on their front porch enjoying their morning coffee and likely checking the notification count on their cruel viral post when a professional process server walked up their driveway. My dad looked confused as he was handed a thick, heavily sealed manila envelope. The moment he signed his name on the delivery receipt, the smug, self-satisfied smile he had been wearing since yesterday completely evaporated from his face. Inside that envelope wasn't a dramatic text message or a tearful phone call begging him to take the photo down. It was a stack of formal, legally binding notices. My husband had drafted a massive copyright infringement claim demanding the immediate removal of the stolen image paired with a statutory cease and desist order. Because the post openly targeted a minor with malicious intent, the paperwork also included a formal demand for statutory damages for using a child's likeness for public harassment and emotional distress. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate violently on the kitchen counter. It was my dad. When I finally answered, his voice had completely lost its usual mocking, patronizing edge. He sounded frantic, breathless, and deeply rattled as he demanded to know what kind of sick game I was playing. I didn't waste my breath arguing with him. I simply told him that if he had any questions about his funny joke, he could direct them straight to our legal counsel. Then I hung up. By 11 a.m., the shockwave of our legal notice had rippled through the entire extended family, and my phone transformed into a battlefield. The relative peace we had maintained for years vanished in an instant as aunts, uncles, and cousins began calling and texting me in a coordinated wave of outrage. They weren't angry at my dad for publicly humiliating a 7-year-old girl. They were absolutely furious with me for breaking some unwritten family code. My dad had clearly forwarded the legal paperwork to everyone, rallying them to his side to paint himself as the victim of an overreacting, vindictive daughter. The family group chats exploded with screenshots of our demands. My aunt sent a scathing text accusing me of destroying my parents' health over a harmless family joke, while a cousin called me heartless for bringing lawyers into a private matter. They used every manipulation tactic in the book, calling me ungrateful and demanding that I force my husband to drop the case immediately. They expected me to back down, fold under the immense social pressure, and apologize for defending my own child. But they had completely miscalculated who they were dealing with. What my family didn't know was that my husband and I had anticipated this exact reaction. As the nasty texts and veiled threats poured in, we didn't delete them. We documented them. My husband quietly drafted secondary digital harassment notices for every single relative who had joined the online mockery or was now attempting to intimidate us into dropping the lawsuit. By trying to protect my dad, the entire extended family had walked directly into our legal crosshairs, turning their coordinated bullying campaign into an airtight record of systemic harassment. What my family still didn't realize was that our legal strategy wasn't just built on anger. It was fueled by a devastating discovery my husband made during the initial evidence gathering. As he deep dived into my dad's social media profile and digital footprint, he uncovered the real reason behind the post. My dad hadn't just shared my daughter's photo on a private profile for a few friends. He had posted it on his publicly viewable, monetized personal blog page. For the past year, he had been trying to build a digital brand around his no-nonsense, brutal honesty persona, using his large follower count to generate ad revenue and drive traffic to affiliate links. By using my copyrighted photo of a minor and writing a highly controversial engagement bait caption, he was intentionally exploiting my daughter's likeness for commercial gain. The moment my husband found those ad trackers and monetization scripts tied to the page, the entire nature of the case shifted. The statutory fines for willful copyright infringement for commercial purposes skyrocketed from a few thousand to an absolute financial death sentence. 2 days later, my dad's newly hired defense attorney called my husband for an emergency consultation. We sat in our home office as the lawyer's voice came through the speakerphone, completely stripped of any legal bravado. He had clearly reviewed the monetization data and the ironclad copyright filings we submitted. The man sounded utterly pale and shaken as he realized his client wasn't just facing a family dispute. He was facing a federal lawsuit that could legally liquidate his entire retirement savings. He desperately begged us for a private mediation session before we filed the official paperwork with the court. The conference room for our private mediation session felt ice cold. My dad and mom sat on one side of the long glass table, completely stripped of the smug arrogance they had displayed online just days earlier. My dad looked 10 years older, his hands visibly shaking as he stared down at the thick stack of financial data my husband had prepared. Beside them, their attorney sat in silence, having already informed them that fighting this in open court would mean immediate bankruptcy. My husband slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was our formal settlement agreement, and the conditions were absolutely non-negotiable. "You have 2 choices," I told my parents, my voice steady and devoid of any anger. "You can sign this right now, or we file the federal lawsuit by 5 o'clock today." The terms were brutal but entirely fair. First, my dad had to issue a public permanent retraction and apology on his page acknowledging his malicious actions. Second, he was required to delete every single social media account he owned and agree to a lifetime digital ban from posting any family imagery. Third, instead of paying us damages, they had to liquidate a massive portion of their investments to establish a mandatory $150,000 clean, untouchable educational trust fund for my daughter. Finally, the agreement enforced a strict, legally binding zero-contact order. My dad looked up at me, tears welling in his eyes as he realized his funny joke had cost him his money, his pride, and his entire family. With a trembling hand, he picked up the pen and signed. 3 months have passed since that icy confrontation in the mediation room, and the silence that followed has been the most beautiful gift of my adult life. After the paperwork was finalized, my husband and I quietly cut all ties with my toxic extended family. Without the constant background noise of their mockery and passive-aggressive judgment, our home has transformed into a true sanctuary of peace. My daughter is thriving, completely unaware of the digital storm that raged over her head, and her future is now entirely secure, thanks to the educational trust her grandparents were forced to fund. As for my parents, the fallout from their funny joke was absolute. True to the legally binding settlement, my dad's monetized blog and social media presence were permanently erased from the internet. Stripped of his online audience and facing massive financial liquidation, he and my mother now live in near total isolation, abandoned by the very relatives who once egged them on. The rest of the family quickly went silent the moment they realized we were tracking their harassment, proving their loyalty was only as deep as their own digital safety. Looking back at the moment that started it all, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel a profound sense of clarity. My dad thought he could use my daughter's innocence to feed his own vanity, but he ended up giving me the ultimate tool to protect her. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until